Welcome to Wild Soul Gatherings. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie. I'll be your host for this episode of Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. Hello to all you wild souls out there. I want to send a special thanks to each of you for taking time out of your day to listen to our guests as we discuss the many aspects of spirituality. To stay updated on our latest episodes, please follow us, share with friends who may be interested, and if you feel so moved, a kind rating and review is always appreciated. The tradition of happy hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, and perhaps an aha moment that may change your life. Welcome to Wild Soul Gatherings. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie, and I'm going to be your host for this episode of Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. Today, I am gifted to have with me Reverend Dr. Diane Riis. She is an author, spiritual director, and coach for women who want to explore the magical technology of writing. Diane has served churches and traditional ministry for many years and now practices an earth-based spirituality as a witch. Reverend Diane runs a small flower farm on Long Island and is the owner of Earth and Soul Coaching and Publishing. She is also the author of How Can a Four-Letter Word Change Your Life? I Can Only Imagine. And Midnight Pages, a mystical workbook for writers, insomniacs, and night owls. So Diane, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you here. Before we get started, one of the things I really want to touch on is I'm excited about the topics that I believe will come up today, especially when you say that you practice an earth-based spirituality as a witch. I feel like in our society, there's a lot of uncomfortableness, to be honest with you, just around the term spirituality. Many folks out there that are awakening or have had unique spiritual gifts that they've experienced, but they've not felt comfortable bringing it up or talking about it. Even the term spirituality in my own life, well, I've had people that really care about me fear that I may be going to hell because I'm expanding myself in this spiritual way, and I appreciate their love, but it makes me feel sad that there's this sense of angst out there with it. I'm excited to touch on some of these perhaps taboo subjects. I feel like, and this is just my own personal opinion, many of us are rooted in deep traditional types of religion and sense that there may be a conflict with that. The other is think that we live in this very fear-based culture where we pay for a lot of entertainment that is fear-based. Horror movies are some of the top grossing movies in our society, and many of those horror movies are based on the occult and different niches of spirituality. And I feel like there's a lot of misinformation that comes out there with it. But because that is so ingrained in people with the emotional experience they have when they watch these movies, it creates a lot of uncomfortableness with having those conversations. That being said, would you like to talk a little bit about your spiritual journey, where you're at now, and some of the innate spiritual gifts that you were born with that were actually turned on that may not be so mainstream?
I would love to, but can I chime into part of what you were talking about? I think I travel in circles where spirituality is not such a taboo or scary subject at all. Even when you're the word witch, I think where I'm at and showing up, even that's not quite so threatening the way that you're alluding to and have when we've spoken in the past about the wider culture saying, oh, what's that? I have to be careful. But I just wanted to say that just yesterday, a friend put up a post on Facebook that said something like, paraphrasing, people get uncomfortable with when we say happy holidays instead of Merry Christmas, when in reality, 27 different kinds of religious festivals are celebrated in the month of December. Mm-hmm. So I commented that I always saw that as just a Christian feeling kind of nervous that somehow their thing is being threatened or taken away, or they're feeling they're losing some control. Like, this is our holiday. This is Christmas, right? This is what December is all about. And I posted that like very gently. I don't think I was trying to be challenging. I know I wasn't trying to be challenging. And a woman wrote, oh, don't worry. We're not nervous. And I wrote back, not worried, it's not keeping me up at night, but I felt like, is that some sort of a defensiveness? What was that comment? And my fear is that, again, there's this polarization, right, between the traditional and the stuff that's bubbling up that is ancient. And that's one of the points I always want to make. We think that somehow here comes this new thing called witchcraft or Wicca or spirituality, you name it, and suddenly it's something new. And it's not. It predates Christianity. It's older than time. It resonates with people on an ancient soul level, right? Yet we are built in the spirit-based system that says us versus them, the good book or the outsider, the other. So I grew up very much in Christian church, Sunday school, youth group, president of the youth group, all of it, all the way up through. And it was always like a kind of observational thing, because how much could a girl in our culture, even in my very liberal congregational model church, where women had some authority. They were never the president of the church, but that was just a sign of the times in the 80s, 70s, 80s. And I remember hearing a missionary came to church and she spoke, and it wasn't, I knew women could be missionaries, more slave labor. Sorry, that's a really privileged and politically incorrect way to put it. So let me change that. Liminal, somewhat dangerous, somewhat expendable, based on really, really hard work with zero acclaim. Women often take those roles on in religion and in churches, right? So let me just say it that way. And she was preaching one Sunday. So I wasn't surprised by the missionary part, because that suffering servant role fits well with what women were told and have been told, that's their role in church. But she was preaching. And all of a sudden I remember being up in the balcony thinking, women can do that? And it extrapolated to something bigger for me. So after I went to college and did really great in religion classes, one of my professors said, you should really go to Harvard Divinity School. And I thought he meant go be a minister. He was also the guy who hooked me up with a youth group that I actually ran for pay at a Presbyterian church. But what he meant was you should go study and get a doctorate in this stuff. And instead I took it to me and I should go be a good person and do what I know to do and be a minister, which is what I did. So I went to Harvard, didn't follow the academic line, followed the ministry line, and which is partially academic, but also kind of trains you up to go and be in this system. And when I came out, because, academia and churches felt so comfortable for me, instead of exploring what I really wanted to do or be, got a job as a minister, as an assistant minister. And that whole time I'm meditating, which would have threatened the heck out of the church, because that was very Eastern back then. That was very, what do you mean, meditating, using visualizations, reading Shakti Gawain. If you remember, she had just come out with her first book, Creative Visualization. That was scary. Reading A Course in Miracles, which only I think 2 people in my church had ever even heard of. And reading about people like Starhawk, reading her books, and others writing about the goddess and about witchcraft, particularly the goddess, which it made perfect sense to me. And if you are a follower of Christianity, I want to just challenge you and ask, doesn't it seem strange that all the figures in the Trinity are male? Where else in nature or in other religions or other faith communities, or even in your own life, is there no visible feminine? So as you start to do some of that exploring, you think, well, in the Hebrew scripture, Sophia can be translated as, Shekinah can be translated as the female wisdom of the Bible, and Sophia in Greek means wisdom. So that's where the feminine comes in. But let's face it, when the priest says Father, Son, and Holy Spirit or Holy Ghost, these are 3 male images, right? At least that's what's being, I think, offered up. I think most people think it's being offered up. So for me, it was always like, where's the goddess? I always used to be very inclusive in our language. We used to say God as not he, whether you alternated with she, which threatened a lot of people, but God as God instead of God he. Instead of referring to man, it was children of God, not sons of God. So we were really cautious about that. I used to call our church the last door on the left, because it was very liberal and very open to exploration. And that church, we did wind up holding things like meditation classes and guided meditation and all sorts of explorations like that. But witchcraft would have been pushing a line. When I left, and I didn't leave gracefully, because I didn't know how to leave gracefully, because I was so embedded in it. It was my security, my comfort, and also the thing I was bucking against the most. When I left, I went full force into that goddess stuff and all the things that I had been doing for 30 years, including reading tarot cards for myself, mostly for the symbolism and for the meditation. But had anyone known I was reading tarot cards every morning as part of my prayer time, right? Instead of prayer time, actually, people would have freaked out. So I went full in doing all that stuff. And it's been 8 years since I left, though it feels like an ancient journey that I've been doing it for so long. Now I'm doing it just as I'm a witch, and my mother still shakes her head. She's 90 and she's just like rolls her eyes, because how can that possibly be? I feel like I deeply disappoint her at this point, because there is nothing greater than your daughter is the minister, right? And then it's my daughter is a witch. But what are you going to do? That's how it goes. So let me just jump back. When I was really young, 14 years old, and all I want to ever know from the time I was even younger than that is, what are we doing here? What's the meaning of all this? What's the purpose of life? What happens after we die? I'll never forget, like literally falling on my knees one day in my bedroom going, I'll do anything, please. I just need to know. Like, it was really deep. for me. And I was reading Seth, the Seth books when those first came out. I'm reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or trying to. I'm reading about reincarnation, and I'm trying to do astral body projection. And you know what? Whatever was starting to simmer and happen, I just wasn't ready. I'm a teenager, with all the other stuff happening in life. And I just wasn't ready for some of the messages and feelings and dreams and things that were starting to show up. So I think I shut it down into a nice little box. And so when all those other things appeared, like ministry and a spirituality that's nicely contained within a cute little white box, which is what a congregational church often is, it felt like I could both pursue this thing and be safe. And it takes a long time to break that fear, open that box back up. And I think that more and more is what I'm doing. So not to say that the box is blown wide open. My safety is now rooted in the earth. I consider it an earth-based practice because of the field, because of the farm. Answers come to me if my feet are in the soil. I do grounding and earthing, which is connecting with the soil. If I have a question and go out there with that request, it'll just be, you're touching the dahlia and something goes, oh, of course. It's so direct. There's really no need for me to have a spiritual practice when I'm there doing that. Now it's winter. I've got to do something to rekindle all that. This week I'm running a new moon workshop, as much for me as anybody who's going to come, right? Because I need the discipline. I need the ritual. I need to show up and do that thing. And if other people come, that's a bonus. So yeah, that's where I'm at. And I just want to, I want to say that I wish I had somebody who knew some of this stuff, even any small amount of it that I could have felt comfortable talking to, because I think I did a lot of knee-jerk reacting instead of going within, asking the right questions, giving myself time. There's always such a hurry. And as Abraham Hicks says, you'll never get it done. You'll never finish it. There's always going to be more life to live. There's always the implication that there are more lives to come as well. And did you know that reincarnation was biblical up until about the 3rd century? Shh.
Oh, I love it. It's great. You and I talk a lot, and honestly, you just feed my soul when we talk. We can go on and on and on. There's so many different directions. You do that for me too. It's lovely. But what I found is, as I've talked to a lot of people, there's folks out there who, as children, could see colors and auras. And I know there was a lady that I worked with the one day, she goes, I think you're feeling really angry about this. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not trying to be politically correct. We used to talk, and she must have felt comfortable with me. And she said, I can see your aura and it's red. And when it's red like that, it means that people are upset and they're angry. And let's talk a little bit about this topic, how we can approach it different. And she goes, I grew up with this. And honestly, I just thought everyone could. And it wasn't until I became a teenager and I said a few things that I realized I was different and other people didn't have this gift. I have people in my own family who shared during their childhood and growing up in their adolescence, they were seeing and connecting with spirits, and it scared the bejesus out of them, and they didn't know what to do with it. Yeah. As I'm learning about this many years later, I'm feeling guilty. Oh, I should have been there to support and do something. But to be honest with you, at that point in time in life, I would have been like, wow, I'm not really sure what to do with this or where to go with it. I've always been very curious like you, and I delve and jump right into things to learn about them. I'm very curious about it. I told you I have the book, The Magic of Reiki, The Magic, Magick, and it's a great book on Reiki. It gives so much information and tools. And the fellow who writes the book identifies as a witch. So it makes people uncomfortable, despite everything being exactly what we teach with Reiki and the content of the book being spectacular. That there still seems to be an uncomfortable with it. How do we support people who are having these experiences, especially our children and our teenagers who don't know what to do with it and are afraid to talk about it? And I thought, well, that's part of what Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious is going to be about. You had mentioned the tarot. I myself like to delve and play in it, would really be interested in becoming more adept at it. And I have friends who love the tarot, but they won't touch it. The one friend said that she pulled in something dark and it scared her. She doesn't have really anyone in her life to talk about it. So it's happening. It's very real, but we don't have a channel or an educational system or information out there for people really to get in touch and delve into it. I was just reading something more recently though, and it said, as we're evolving as a society and a culture, that people like mediums and other energetic workers are going to be held in higher regard, and folks are going to be reaching out and utilizing all these different mediums in addition to their traditional healthcare medicine belief system. I found that fascinating when I was reading about that. And I think that we're already seeing that.
It is. I just want to say that energetically, if people, just the fact that we're having this conversation shifts the energy. If people start to feel that, oh, wow, it really would be great to have somebody to talk to, they need to start watching their life, because that book, that podcast, that person is ready to come in. When they're ready, the teacher appears, but it's more than that. It's energetically, suddenly there's an eye open to seeing that guidance, that help. And I think you're right. I think culture is changing, and those helps are around us more and more. There's more opportunity for people, including the message and the work of what you're doing with this podcast, including, there are so many places now that will shift God, he to God, she. And your ears perk up. And now I kind of just laugh because, the wave in my mind was a long time ago, but people are kind of doing it now. You're seeing it in, like, what were we watching? A rerun of Manifest. We're streaming Manifest, that TV show, and they're referring to God as she all over the place. I was like, oh, cool, catching on. So I think we are on a wave of empaths having more of a role. The idea of the highly sensitive person, not being so weird and strange and, the weird kid in the classroom, but as the person who's tuned into something else. People who have dreams, people who see auras, all that sort of thing, I think becomes more and more appreciated. I think that the neurodivergent community, ADHD, schizophrenia, insomniacs, all those people, bipolar people, all those people who have diagnoses of various kinds are just different in beautiful spiritual ways, like empaths and mediums, clairvoyants, people who are clairsentient. There is a different channel being opened as we start to see these, not as handicaps or weirdness, but instead as wonderful gifts, cherished differences, places where we can lean in to be curious about our neighbor and the person beside us who may have something important to share with us. In terms of, on the one hand, I had a colleague who offered this tarot Facebook thing. And I keep referring to Facebook. I really don't love social media. She hosted this thing and a bunch of people unsubscribed from her. I think I told you, unsubscribed from her list as soon as it was over, because she shared a lot about witchcraft. And then it turns out that she offered some kind of a program on witchcraft and 30 women signed up for it. So those who were not ready fell away, and 30 people she never expected, she thought maybe a group of 30 women signed up to find out more. So more is out there, and there are more books and people talking about it. And just the energy of even this podcast is shifting us in the direction of support for those who are curious, support for those who feel called in some way. And we have to disassociate calling with only calling to a priesthood, calling to a role in an organized church. We are called all day long, and we need to learn to watch for the signs when we're ready. Maybe need to isn't even the right word. When you are ready, the signs will become so obvious that they will lead you exactly out of the enchanted forest where you are lost in all the old stories and little white congregational boxes that you may have been living in. And out in that new field is all sorts of possibility and potentiality. It is the literal capital F field of all possibility. And that's kind of where it feels a lot more free for me. When it was starting to happen, it was free in the sense of the song, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Where do you go now if you leave the little box? Like, what's safe when you're outside of the rules, outside of what society says is okay? And you start to fly. You start to realize what that freedom can do for you. Sometimes it feels unsettling, but mostly now, it's like the fact I had to show up here at a time, like 1:00, it's really disorienting for me because I just sort of flowed. Just the idea of, I've got to focus and be like coherent. I'm just mostly in this creative place that a lot of that rigid stuff about showing up, because I used to be this phobic person about being on time. I used to have to appear a certain way. The hair had to be straight and I had to be, now a lot of that it's so nice. It's so nice to be more in touch. And the goddess doesn't care. Spirit doesn't care. It's just calling you out to be more of who you are. It's fun.
I love it. And it's interesting because they truly are spiritual gifts. All those things that you talked about. I love that she had 30 people sign up for her class. And as you were talking, I was thinking there are a lot of folks who are trying to figure out how to turn on these gifts that many of them recognize that they had in their younger years, but conformed themselves out of it, and sort of how to flip that switch out there. And there's a lot of folks that are offering support with that. I did want to touch on the Trinity. I feel like the earth is shifting into more of a divine feminine feminine from a divine masculine. And really what we need is a balance between the two of them. And you talk about the Trinity, and in a lot of some of the classes that I'm working with and what they're talking about, they really talk about Holy Spirit being the divine feminine. But growing up in a traditional religion, you're right, it was always presented as a male energy, male figures. And I'm seeing a shift with that. To shift topics a little bit, you and I have a commonality with activism, and we're shifting in how we manage our definition of activism. So do you want to touch on what you feel spiritual activism is?
I think that I wrestle with this because there's the idea, and I understand it, about the spiritual bypass. So I never want to be in a place that says, I'm going to elevate above this and pray for you. And the more I raise my consciousness, I see that it's all an illusion. It's all a dream. And none of this really matters anyway, right? There is a spiritual bypass there. I believe that if something shows up in front of you that needs to be done, do it. There is a call that says people are hungry this Thanksgiving. Feed them. If there's something that you need to stand for, go vote, go protest, go knock on doors, do the thing, right? What I don't ever want to see people do anymore is what I think a lot of folks do. It's this hand wringing. We need to help. It's almost like they're as invested in the suffering and the pain as in the potential solution. And out of that energy, I just do not believe lasting, permanent, spiritual solutions come. Spiritual activism for me much more nowadays is tuning into my own equilibrium around things so that I'm not contributing to mayhem, energetic mayhem. I do try to remember that this is not our only lifetime. There is a bigger plan of which we are a part. The dramas sometimes are just that when we start to see through them, and that the universe is working its purposes out through us, through our creativity and with our participation. Julian of Norwich said, all will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well. And I think at the end of days, whenever that is, when some eternal equation is solved, all will be well, and there will be a purpose that we may never understand it in our lifetime. I try not to avoid the obvious acts of service, callings to get off my butt and do something active physically right here and now in the third dimension. But on that other dimensional level, there's more playing out than I realize. And sometimes I have to let go of my judgments about what is evil and what is good.
Well said. I think it is much bigger than us, and everything is playing out exactly as it's supposed to. Recognizing and stepping out of the third dimensional self isn't always so easy. Paying attention to that makes a difference.
The idea that maybe it's wrong to say that there is an ideal ending that is like destiny. I don't mean to imply destiny. I believe we're co-creators with the divine. We are godlike in our power to create. And I don't mean manifesting in a magical way. I mean, the things that we choose to focus on, believe, and do really does create the world we live in. And you could see proof of that everywhere we look, in our politics, in our society, our economy, you name it. It is unfolding as we participate in the unfoldment, if that makes any sense. I don't think that it's destined. I think that everything is happening simultaneously, right? No past, present, or future. Multidimensionality is a real thing, and science is starting to prove that is true based on the spiritual belief of that forever. And so who knows what other parallel life of mine am I making some other decision and spinning off into a whole nother reality for what I call my life in that dimension. I mean, I love playing with those ideas that everything, even the most horrifying vote that is taken in this country, spins off into some fabulous creation of which I know nothing because I voted a different way and chose a different thing and am living here on planet Earth in the United States in New York at this time. I think it's a really beautiful, mysterious puzzle. And I do not believe that we are here to divorce our incarnated selves with our spiritual self. We are rooted in these beings. Every sign or symptom we have is a symbol pointing us in a direction. And it's not to, and for years I thought I wanted to transcend all this stuff. I wanted to get out of my body. I wanted to break free of all this so I could be enlightened, capital E, and free of all all life is suffering, says the Buddha, right? And all that. I wanted that transcendence. That's not how it happens. We are incarnated. We are in flesh, and it's through the flesh and through these experiences in relationship, in all of the stuff that happens to us, that we are playing out creation, all creation, and creation celebrates. And I hate to say this, but creation plays itself out in what we call evil, in what we call good, in what we call love, in what we call not love. It is our choice to err on the side of what feels elevated and brightening and enlightening and life-giving and generative. But creation is what creation is. And And the same way that there's decay, there is death. When I was a minister, it was hard because I never had this hard line about death. I used to say, nobody gets out of here alive. I know that wasn't particularly kind, but a lot of times I thought that whether you believe in a heaven, whether you believe in the next life, whether you believe that this life is here to teach us things and then we move on in some way spiritually, death is just a doorway. I've always seen it. You die and you open your eyes and it's as if you were having a very long dream. You say, oh, that dream was so real. Wow. The same way you wake up from a very real dream at night, your spiritual self wakes up and goes, that dream was so real. I really thought I was this woman living in New York being a witch. Silly. Wasn't that fun? To me, it's enjoy it while you're here. It wasn't only Jesus who became God incarnate. That's us.
Was so eloquently said. I love it. And I feel like, and maybe it's what you said, because you know, it's your norm, because that's your community that you're surrounded with. So to me, I would say to you, well, that's pretty much mainstream rhetoric and conversation. And we're becoming more aware and open. I always have to think, is that because that is who I surround myself with? And that's the conversations I have. And that's the normal. Or is it really filtering out more so into the mainstream? I do believe it's more into the mainstream. But I do want to go a little bit of a different direction. You talked about Seth. I think, as you know, I'm very into channelers. I think that people channel all the time and don't even recognize that they themselves are channelers. A lot of the people I have followed, like Sarah Weissman and Chiron, books that are written out there, people say that I didn't write this. It was channeled, through me by different entities and spirits and angels. And Seth, I had not heard of Seth until we started talking. And I find Seth fascinating. Do you want to just share with the listeners a little bit about that particular channeler?
Seth was channeled by a woman named Jane Roberts, beginning in around, I think it was 1961 or 63. For 21 years, she channeled Seth, who he called himself something like an entity consciousness or energetic entity or something along that line, who had lived lives in the past, but now was in an energetic form and needed a person to relay the message. So her husband, Robert Butts, would take notes longhand, and eventually they started to record the sessions, and they started to invite people in to witness the sessions and to also ask Seth during while Jane was channeling Seth. So it really was a collaboration between her husband Robert and herself, Jane Roberts, and Seth would come in, and there are something, I don't know, dozens of books and hours of recording, and the papers are held at one of the Yale libraries, and a lot of it was published very mainstream. And I think I was very young when I first came upon it, and I found it was scary to me. It was it was the first time I ever thought about it, and the cover of the book at the time was kind of this creepy thing. And I remember even Oprah said it was spooky, and I thought, okay. Later on, I thought I'm in good company, even if she thought it was spooky. But having come back to it over the last couple of years and reading up, I've been taking a course which really has helped just bring home some of those ideas. It talks about all of the multidimensionality, so many really complicated ideas about the nature of reality, which involves, now physics has evolved 30 or 40 years since that channeling, those channel conversations were happening. And you could see more and more of it coming together. And you go, wow, there really is proof showing up for a lot of the things that he said. But just this past week, as you're talking about, a lot of this is kind of the lingua franca. It's just common. I was just reading, I looked up something about the Seth books, and there is this not very old academic journal disproving all of it, going through and just note this is impossible and this can't be and this doesn't verify. And it's so interesting because somebody said, how come we need verification like this? It might have even been Seth who said it. We need to go back to the dates that he mentioned. We need to prove everything. Whereas if you just heard somebody like a politician stand up and say this, thus, and so, do you really go back and say, I want to talk to everyone everyone who saw him that day? What color did he have his hair dyed? What time of day was that? Meanwhile, we set a standard that is so high for spiritual things and so low for so many others. Every time my husband looks at the editorial opinion pages in the newspaper, I'm like, why do I want to just randomly read somebody else's opinion, right? And yet there's, I think, a different standard. Those wind up in the newspaper, and the opinion of a spirit, quote unquote, is really looked at through kind of scary lenses. That kind of criticism, that's weird, that's spooky, that's crazy, gets imposed on a lot of the various people who channel. I know a few channelers, a few mediums myself. They're lovely people and really believe and really feel and share messages that, a friend of mine brought my dad through, knowing things that there is no way anybody possibly could have, right? And then shortly after that connection was made, he started showing up more to me in these crazy ways that, made me laugh out loud, which had they they not come first through Sally, I probably would have been terrified. But because she normalized it for me, I felt like, oh, sure, here it is. This is okay. By her being a medium for me, opened a channel of my own. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And that's what happens. Speaking of channeling, one of the things I do when I write is I feel like I'll go back and read things that I swear to God I don't remember reading. I just don't. And so stuff is coming through all of us all the time. That's one of the things I love to teach when I'm working with writers. We do automatic writing. We do intuitive writing, which is kind of the same thing. Seth and Jane Butts and all those others, and what is Abraham Hicks and Esther Hicks and Abraham? She's channeling for them. We don't use that language about it, right? We don't use the word channel so much, but that is in effect what she's doing. But Seth, start with Seth speaks, and the nature of personal reality would be the second one. And the nature of personal reality helps really the very practical stuff. And I'll just share one or two exercises. Just do this. Close your eyes, see yourself on a dark stage, go within and ask yourself, who am I? Don't use any of your senses to answer that question. So you might want headphones and a blind. Don't use your sight, your taste. Don't even feel like your body's digestive juice is gurgling. Just see in your inner sense an answer to the question, who am I? And then you can also do this as you're starting to fall asleep. Close your eyes and see if you can feel where the source of your breathing comes from. It's not just your lungs. It's not just the autonomic nervous system. Your breath, and a lot of in the Eastern tradition, when they say your breath is breathing you, follow that thread a little bit and see if you can find out, if my breath is breathing me, what is the source of that breath? What is the source of my life? Just as you're drifting off to sleep. And starting to ask those questions, like I can't remember who said it, but they said the only important question that you should ever ask is, who am I? So Seth, I think one of the most basic things, and my favorite mantra that I've taken from Seth, there's a lot of deep esoteric things that he suggests you affirm to yourself every day. Mine is this, I think I told you this, I treat myself gently and I am my own best friend. It's this most sweet, humble, simple thing that will transform your spiritual and real life like you can't even imagine. Where is my breath coming from? Who am I? Well, all this I don't know, but I know I treat myself gently and I am my own best friend. And see where it takes you.
That's beautiful. Definitely beautiful. And I can't think of the name of the author. I read a book. It's called I Am. It was written in 1925 by a Catholic priest, and it was channeled. I remember his name was Joseph. I can't think of what his last name was. And it very specifically is, who am I? I am. There's a lot out there. And when you delve into a lot of it, the message is the same. We've talked about this.
It starts to all coming together. It's like, right? It starts to all overlap after a while.
It's like everything is the same. The ending, the conclusion, regardless where you travel to, whether you're in Tibet, you're in that Eastern religion, those cultures, even Christianity. At the end of the day, it's all the same. And you and I both had to laugh the other day. Take it back to the Wizard of Oz. It's just click your heel 3 times. You were always home. Like you've always had all this information. And you can search and search and search all you want, but you're going to come back to your home of who you are. It's fascinating to me.
To circle back to where you began, though, I used to always say there are many ways up the mountain. There's one mountain, there's many ways up. There are people who really protest that and feel like their way is the way. And everybody else isn't going to get to the same place, and there are consequences. And that's where the conversation about heaven and hell come in, punishment, damnation. And I think that's alive. I think that's active for so many people. It's out there, right? But I do believe there's one mountain, many ways up, and we all achieve the end result, which is love, which is realizing who we really are. And people think, well, who's that? What Seth in that community, he calls people gods in training. We are gods in training. Questions the idea of the I am, because that is ego-based, and ego is important, but it's only a part of us. And it's not just about the I and the I am. It's about something much more, what I hate to say, but complicated than that. But we don't need to worry about that. We need to worry about, who am I in this moment? And where is this breath coming from? How do I treat myself gently in a world that really would rather see you hustle and grind, right? Or show up and perform and be a certain way and play the role. And what is it like to treat yourself gently? And that's a spiritual discipline, right? That's a task. And as gentle as it feels, I would say that discipline is, I used to think it was a way to whip yourself into shape and get there and show up and do the thing. Discipline is, if you think about the disciples, they didn't follow Jesus because they had to. They followed him out of love. So I see discipline as discipleship, as doing something because you love it, because you couldn't not do it. It's making the space and the time to go ahead and do that thing you love.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
So Midnight Pages for insomniacs. Tell me about Midnight Pages and how that all came about.
Let me see. Let me show you my book cover. So this is Midnight Pages, if you could see that. Midnight Pages is a big fat workbook that came to me one day, and then it took me 6 months to sit down and write it, but I wrote it in a month after that. I'm neurodivergent in 2 ways. I'm bipolar, and because of that, majorly insomniac, irregular, erratic in sleeping. And everyone's, oh my God, you're going to die young. My husband, you need your sleep. And you know what? I came across Rumi one night, late at night, and it was Rumi's poem set to music over YouTube saying, don't sleep. Stay awake for the sake of the stranger, capital S, which I took to mean spirit, right? The one who knocks on the door and has a message for you. And so the thought about the book is the night has something to tell us. And as creative beings, when we get up out of bed, instead of our fretting and, oh no, tomorrow I'm going to get Alzheimer's and I'm going to have high blood pressure and be obese because I can't sleep, get up and see what the night has to tell you. Get up and create the thing that's keeping the bed feel like a bed of nails. Get up and create the thing, and you will eventually be able to sleep because it will be out of you and in a created form, which is where it belongs. So first of all, to relax and take it easy. And Seth said that the ideal sleep schedule would be to sleep about 5 hours at night, to wake up and make sure you take a 2-hour or an hour-long nap during the day, which happens to be very close to my natural cycle. He said, you'll find yourself less tired. It's not regular or normal to take that 8-hour mono sleep. And historically, if you do some of the research on this, which I did for Midnight Pages and found some other scholars who did as well, mono sleep, the 8 or 9 hours that we're supposed to be getting every night, is not how people have slept, not throughout time. I mean, think of somebody sleeping in a cave prior to, locking of doors. Who was sleeping through the night? Nobody. Or they were assigning somebody to stay up all night. Multiple people, especially young people. You know how teenagers are less prone to wanting to sleep through the night? Those would be the likely candidates to go defend the rest of the tribe or the rest of the people staying in that tent or that cave. The sleep schedule that seems natural to you is the one that is okay for you. And what do you do with the time that you wake up? Well, in the Middle Ages, they got up, they made love, they had a snack, they went and talked to the neighbors, they smoked a cigar or whatever they smoked. And it's not an abnormal thing. They called it first sleep and second sleep. Seth sometimes recommends you take an early sleep, like evening time, and then wake up in the middle of the night and continue staying awake until later on in the day. So Midnight Pages is a workbook with prompts and the idea of exploring the night for your own creative purposes. I include a book of days, which is a kind of early modern thing that folks would keep from the religious community, from the Christian community. They keep watch throughout the night. It's like keeping a vigil. I have a dream journey where you kind of imagine your life as a journey and you create a travelogue to kind of help you get perspective on where you've been and where you might like to go and what's missing and who's traveling with you and who would you like to be traveling with you and what would you learn and what would you bring back as souvenirs. And it's I think it's fun, and it's supposed to be a companion to distract until you can feel comfortable enough to just sit in the dark and listen to whoever shows up with a message.
Awesome.
It's a great gift, by the way. Great gift. It's way cheaper if you buy the ebook too. So you spend like $5 as opposed to $25. I have to send you one, Sandra.
Okay, that would be awesome. And then you do some classes with that, or you have a forum on Facebook?
I do. I have a Facebook group, but I don't do much with it as a forum right now, frankly. Okay. I'm not sure. It kind of came full born, and I wasn't sure what to do with it aside from write it. So here it is, and I'm planning. I have to figure out what to do with it exactly. And what I'm really curious about, and I know I'm going to switch on you a little bit, but you mentioned the Middle East, and I know you lived there, and I know you spent time in so many places and had so many experiences. And I just wondered, I'd love for you to have a forum to share your spiritual insights, as well as you interviewing others and sharing, because I feel like you have such a depth of experience and training, and I would love to hear that, you're sharing that too.
Awesome. So at some point, you want to interview me?
Yeah.
I guess I touch on it in little snippets in the different podcasts that I've done. That's all you get. Right?
Yeah.
That's how it works.
I'd love to hear about how you came upon Reiki and what your training was like. I got up to Reiki 1 years and years ago in a kind of subset of Reiki. Then I do therapeutic touch, which is similar but not. So I just moved in that direction. That felt a lot more it's mine, And I think when you're talking about the complexity and how much there is, I think that's true. And I think it's okay for us to say, what do I really know? I think there's a fun humility to that. It's okay, right? We can be gods in training and for right now not know. And you talked about somebody bringing in something dark into her tarot exploration. Stay in the lane of good. Seth says, there is no evil to worry about. You live in a safe universe, and we scare ourselves out of believing that. So affirm that you are safely within your highest self, safely within your soul, secure to do any sort of exploration of your multidimensional lives as you wish. And my feeling is the minute it starts to feel scary, like you did in Egypt, I don't know about this, you just pulled back and observed and relaxed into the space you were. And before you knew it, things opened up a little bit more, right? So
in a way you can't even imagine.
That's what you need to be talking about. Yeah. Okay. Because then you are contributing to the conversation in this leading edge way that most people haven't had that kind of experience, which are not, right?
No, I agree. And I will say, just to sum it up, it was the most intensely beautiful thing that I've ever experienced in my life. I never experienced that kind of intense emotional love from wherever ever in my life. It was amazing. It was beautiful. It was great. And the Reiki, I've talked about it on other programs, but just to share with you, I literally woke up one morning with, you need to become a Reiki master. I thought it was a dream. I've never heard of it. At the time, Reiki was not mainstream. I tried to pretend that it didn't happen. We'll call it, whatever the it
that
is.
That work out for you.
Right? Spirit. Oh my God, I was kicked in the ass until I became a Reiki master. I was compelled to do it. Spirit was not letting me off the hook with it. It's very obvious to me that it was just a shift in my journey of being more open to the universe as an energy that was bigger than something I could have ever imagined. And needless to say, it was okay, God, I think that's who's talking to me. I don't know. I've worked in behavioral health. I wasn't talking about it to anyone because I didn't want anyone to think that, if you hear voices,
you were weird.
Someone wants to put you on a medicine or something. And I can't be doing that.
Don't you think Reiki's had a huge part to play in expanding people's kind of spiritual awareness in this country? I think Reiki's just become so big, so known. I remember first hearing about it, and it was Reiki, I didn't know what the heck it even was. And now you're right, it's so much more mainstream that I think it's opened the door to. It's sort of, here's an option when you're trying to heal yourself, right? You can go to the doctor, you can go get a massage, you could go get some body work. Oh, what's that? Well, there's Reiki and there's other somatic practitioners and there's cranial sacral, right? It's just become this thing that even 10 years ago wasn't so accessible or mainstream or
100%. And it's accepted by the medical community for the most part. Mm-hmm. The shift
EFT, I do tapping. The whole EFT, the tapping community, that's actually accepted as well. There's all these studies, all this MRI stuff to see how people are doing under Reiki, under EFT, under hypnosis, and all those ways that we are actually helping ourselves energetically. You can't see it. And so a lot of people don't want to believe it, but the vibration is true. The vibration is there, and things change.
So to take this full circle, when you start talking about, the Reiki and the EFT, and, we have practitioners, the chiropractors, there's a lot of naturopathic healers. Like, it really has become normalized, where when I first was given the message from Spirit that this is what I was to do, I talked to a lot of people. No one had ever heard of it. You couldn't even Google it at the time. It's become very normalized. And in the beginning, I think I, went on a little bit about the perceptions in our society associated with different spiritual practice and different spiritual work, as in the term witch or clairvoyance, or, that innate knowing, those feelings, all those different gifts. There's been a fear attached to it. And I think that our media does not help with it, with all the horror and the fear. And, we're fear junkies as a society for the most part. I think that overarching we are, as Reiki and EFT and all these things have become very normalized and accepted. We're on that path of getting the message out that this is all it's not any different. It's all the same spiritual gifts and journey and energy. There's a lot more to learn about. Different people have innate gifts. We need to be open and accepting and having the conversation about it. And you always have the conversation like so well.
Thanks. I think, though, that I want to go back to what you initially said. I think there's a huge pushback. In New York, you can't be a naturopath and prescribe medicine and stuff. You have to call yourself a nutritionist, and you can't prescribe. Like, I think there's all sorts of rules about how energy comes to us. Like, it's one thing to have prayer answered and the Mother Mary protect you. It's another thing if the goddess does it. It's just, I think a lot of it is languaging, but there's a lot of fear attached to the alternatives. So to come full circle, and to talk about witchcraft, it's super connected to feminism. It's connected to women's power. Scary as hell to a lot of people, even now. Our country shows that power being taken away from people for choice and for their own autonomy. I had a friend who told me, evangelical Christian, but now practices a kind of much broader spirituality, though still somewhat church connected. She said over 15 years ago, she bought a Wicca book in the store, really curious, thought it was going to be interesting. And she put it in the closet and never read it. And years later found it and threw it away. She was too scared to read it and too scared to have other people see that she even owned it. And it was only recently she told me she's reading about some goddess stuff and some women feminist stuff about being the daughter of the goddess, being the daughter of God. And the stuff she's saying to me is like things that I first discovered when I was 18 and read Betty Friedan and spirituality and feminism. And there are still people out there who are only finding their way to see it as not scary that a woman might have some spiritual authority. There are people who wouldn't come to my church because they said, a woman's the preacher over there. We're not talking very long ago. As for witchcraft, it is not about dark magic. It is not worshiping Satan. It is not demonic. It is not dark. The reed says, do as thou wilt, but harm none. And that is absolutely what we aspire to do. We align ourselves with the spirits of nature, of the good and harmonious. Magic is making our will, helping reality conform to our will. And that's life. Like, don't we all go through life trying to make reality conform to our will? The way we want our lives to be, the things we intend, call it intention, manifestation, or magic, whatever you want. We use elements from the earth, oils, crystals. I go straight to things like the soil and the leaves themselves. I bypass a lot of the other stuff. I do a very elemental form of magic, so I don't have elaborate altars or anything like that. Although people have looked at my altars and said, oh my God, there's too much going on there. For me, they're as basic as it can be. Salt and water and light and incense to represent air. It's as simple as, here are some greens, here's a coin, and here's the color green in the candle, and here's a piece of basil because it's a powerful smell, right? You just want to bring in those senses. I love the higher mystery schools I love stuff like the thelema. I'm thinking about how to do more of the Kabbalistic stuff, but you don't need to do any of that, right? You can just follow your personal path out of the woods. The little stones are already glowing, you just have to follow them. They're all right there. And that's really what I love to teach, use all the symbols that are obvious. The Joseph Campbell, the Carl Jung, the Marion Woodman, all of those people, Maria Louise von Franz, all of the dreams and the symbolism, and that stuff chimes in so much with the Seth material that if people start to explore all that, you will do that long enough and find the overlap in all these ways. And I feel bad that you said I'm like sharing such simple stuff. I guess I learned long ago when you're preaching to condense things down to like the simple level so everybody can get a piece of it. Next time I'll try to be more esoteric and difficult and, bring more interesting stuff to the table.
Oh, everything has been amazingly interesting. And you have provided so many different avenues and references for people to look into and touch on. I think that you gave a very nice menu of different things for people to delve into and explore. And hopefully they won't buy the book and put it in a closet and be afraid to look at it. Like that hurt my heart when you told that story, that there's just that much fear, because clearly she's being compelled to do it and being pulled to do it.
Yeah, it's shocking to hear, but it's true. It's happening.
Yeah. I think more and more people are awakening. I think more people are open. Some people aren't ready, just like you said, your friend who had the class, and people who jumped off her list, and then more people than she expected signed up. So we all get drawn to our tools that are going to help us along the path, whether or not we choose to engage in them in an easy way or kicking and fighting, or we just don't. I mean, it's going to keep cycling back until you open that door and delve into whatever it is that you're supposed to delve into. And I think the other message that you gave that I absolutely love is that it's not cookbook. It is unique and it is different for every soul that has been born on the planet, whatever journey that they came here to do, and how they approach it and embrace it and experience it and feel it is unique to them.
Yeah. And the self-love part, the treating ourselves gently, is the only way that gets to happen. Otherwise, we just feel afraid of the messages we're getting, and we say, oh, this isn't the party line. This isn't the official line of consciousness. I must be doing it wrong, or this must be dark or evil or scary, right? When you love yourself, you start to believe the signs you're getting. You start to accept that it's okay. This is a lesson that at my age, I'm coming back around to at a deeper level, right? And don't we always go at it? Keep at it, and the level just gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
100%. 100%. Any other messages you would like to leave for the listeners?
See about those if there truly are 27 other festivals that happen in the month of December. I hope everybody is now curious to find out what those are. See why we don't say Merry Christmas so much as we say Happy Holidays now to include. And I you said the menu of things that I talked about today. Your experiences are so diverse too that you also bring a menu of beautiful things that we could just explore and unpack like a picnic. And I would love to do that at some point with you and keep going and do more of that. And, we talked about possibly my friend who's a medium coming on and chatting with you. I'd love for you to be able to have her. That way people will feel the way I feel, like, oh, here's someone I can really, she's so likable. She's so down to earth and she does this. And even she, when she started, didn't quote unquote believe in it. Right. So you start to feel like maybe there's more possible. And maybe even the sounds and thoughts and voices I'm getting don't mean I'm neurodivergent or crazy. They mean I'm tuned in. And that would be a beautiful thing. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for letting me be on and have a chance to chat about some of this stuff. I think, you get clarity when you get to say things out loud too. It kind of makes sense in a different way. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm really grateful to have you on. I have to tell you, I'm curious. I could have named 7 off the top of my head of other holidays. 27. I'll have to look at the other 20. That's a lot. I thought I was doing good because I knew 7 more. So always more. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being on the show. This is a journey. You and I have a lot more to do on our journey for sure. I want to thank the listeners for taking time out of their day to join us and to be part of this. And always remember, embrace that wild soul. There's a lot out there. take a chance, jump in, see what else is out there for you. Diane, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra.
I'd like to thank our guests for joining us for this episode of Wild Souls Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To find out more about our guests, how to contact them, or detail on this episode, please see our show notes. You can also visit us at our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We would love to hear from our visitors what you thought of this show, what you would like to see and hear in the future, questions you may have.
Go to podinbox.com/happy hour for the spiritually curious. You can leave either a voice or traditional message for us.
This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.